Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give everybody just 2 minutes to come in. I think we have 45 people on. We'll just give a few more minutes, so bear with us. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and start. Today's training title is Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Early Childhood Classroom. And that training is going to be provided to you by me, Adrienne Gilliard, and Miss Carolina White. All right. So before we begin, we're going to go over the typical things that we always do, and that's we'll go over the attendance, credits, pre-post, test, and evaluations. So all ELC Broward trainings are for in-service hours only. Your training certificate will be emailed to you within 24 hours and sent to the email address that you entered in for your registration. In marked as attended, you must log onto the computer or download the GoToWebinar app on your phone. Just calling in doesn't necessarily register your attendance, and you will not receive a certificate or be marked as attended. If you can't see the screen, then we can't see you. So that's why calling in is not always the best option. Starting July 1st, all trainings will have a pre-test of 3 questions to answer when you register. And when you complete the training, you'll have a post-test of 3 questions and a training survey of 5 questions. Those will launch after you finish. So please complete all of the information that is provided. Now we'll do some light housekeeping. We are pretty much all familiar with this GoToWebinar platform. When we first started this, we were all new at it, but now I think everybody, we're pretty much pro, those of you who are in attendance and for the presenters. So there's a questions box located in this platform. If you click on the chat icon at the top of your toolbar and hit the send or drop down menu button to select your recipient of the message, and that person will get your message. And I think all of your messages go to everyone. There's also a handout section in this platform, and that icon is on your toolbar. If you tap on the icon, then select the file to download it, that file will download automatically. And so when you see this image on one of our slides, you'll know that handout for that section, for that information. So be sure to go to the handout section and get it. There's also a hand raising feature here. You can raise or lower your hand by clicking the icon on the control panel. I just like to remind you that if you do decide to raise your hand to ask a question or anything, once we answer your question, please remember to put your hand down so that your hand isn't raised throughout the whole training. And there are quite a few of you on the line today, so if we by any chance don't get to your question, we will have our email addresses posted so that you can email us if you need to. Now it's time to meet the presenters. As I stated in the opening, I'm Adrienne Gilliard. I think most of you already are pretty familiar with me and my credentials and my education background and everything, so I won't go through the list and read them all out. But the most important thing that about me that's from this list is that I have over 21 years of experience in the field of early childhood education. And I honestly feel that I am more in love with early childhood education now than I was when I started at 19 years old. So just a few things about me is that I have a wonderful husband and we just celebrated 4 years of marriage last month. I have a funny and amazing 7-year-old stepson and a very charismatic French bulldog whose name is Mars. I love spending time with my family every chance that I can get. My parents are two of my very best friends, and we talk on the phone at least 6 times a day. And that's no joke. We do the good morning call, the what did you have for lunch call, the good afternoon call, the gossip call, and then there's our good night call and everything else. We honestly talk that many times a day. And I'll be so glad when COVID-19 is over so we can resume our visits because they North Carolina, and we're trying to keep them safe with them being a part of the vulnerable population. And so we're not allowing them to travel to us, and we're not traveling to them. So we'll be so glad when all of this is over.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Adrian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Carolina White. I am Adrian's partner in crime for this presentation. Some stuff about me. I have actually been in this field for about 19 years, and 11 of those I taught VPK in. So just like Adrian, I love this field very much, even more so than I did when I started. I love to dance salsa. I love to eat sushi, which I haven't had in like 6 months because of COVID. So I've been really having withdrawals from sushi. I have 2 awesome teenage daughters who actually started school today. So they're in their respective offices in the house, hopefully handling some business. And I have an awesome dog named Marley and a wonderful husband of 15 years.
All right. So now that you have a little bit more background information about us, I'm going to give you the agenda for today. And it's rather simple. We are going to define culturally responsive teaching and its functions. We are going to connect the functions to the whole child, which means that's the curriculum, the environment, and the child's growth and development and families of the children that you serve. We'll also define implicit bias. We'll show how culturally responsive teaching and implicit bias go hand in hand. We'll give examples of how culturally responsive teaching, or CRT, is addressed in the early childhood classroom, and we'll give a summary at the end. So before we begin, we want to gauge how comfortable you all are with discussing race, culture, and bias. We know that right now our country is very divided, tensions are super high, and our emotions are heightened. So we want to be sensitive to what we present and the information that we give while also providing a safe space for this very important topic. So please let us know by typing into the chat box how you feel personally. Any answer is welcome, and there will be no judgment. We just want to get an idea. I also want to point out that there are smiley faces and sad faces on this little gauge, but that has nothing to do with the opinions on your level of comfortability. It was just the best picture we could find in the moment. So if you can, just type in the chat box what level of comfortability you have with discussing race, culture, and bias.
Okay, we have actually a lot of greens or varies, and somewhat. So that's pretty awesome. Everybody seems very comfortable with the topic, which is wonderful.
Okay, good. I'm glad that we have a good range. It's okay if you feel somewhat comfortable. It's okay if you're very comfortable. And it's even okay if you're not comfortable with it at all. But because sometimes that, out of that discomfort, when we do any physical exercise, we make progress only after we put ourselves through some sort of discomfort anyway, right? So if we want to build muscles, we have to put our bodies under stress to do so. And similarly, if we want to grow as a person, we have to be willing to get a little bit uncomfortable. So as a group, let's see if we can commit to some of the guidelines of this webinar. So comfort zones are most often expanded through discomfort, like we just said. And discomfort is a catalyst for growth. and it makes us yearn for something more. It forces you to change, stretch, and adapt. So as we look for the guidelines of the training, we want you to welcome a little bit of discomfort. We also want you to take care of your learning, and in that we mean be present and be engaged with the information that we're giving today. We also want you to assume positive intent. Everything that we present here today comes from a caring and a loving place. It's all positive, and this is a positive space for all of you. It's also okay to be skeptical. It's okay to disagree to any question. You know, it's okay to disagree with anything that we say. It's okay to question. Again, this is a very safe space. And we also want you to remember to keep an open mind. So before we start, let's take a deep breath. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And let's begin. So culturally responsive teaching, the essence of it. You notice as we go through this training, we might switch between culturally responsive teaching and CRT, which is the acronym. It just depends on, you know, how many words our mouths are spitting out at one time. So we'll go between the two. But we're going to talk about the essence of culturally responsive teaching. And CRT is a research-based approach that makes meaningful connections between what students learn in school and their cultures, languages, and life experiences. So it really just validates and affirms the cultures of the students that we have in our classrooms, and it incorporates their cultures and multiple aspects of learning and the environment in meaningful ways. And this approach also encourages educators to hold high expectations of the children and their ability to learn the content that we present to them. Culture is central to learning, as you all know, and it plays a role in not only communicating and receiving information that we give, but also in shaping the thinking process of groups and individuals. And this approach, or this pedagogy, as we like to call it too, recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of their learning. So there are quite a few characteristics of culturally responsive teaching. And the first one is positive perspectives on parents and families. So this is whether or not you do an informal chat as the parent brings their child to school, or in a phone conversation, through newsletters that are sent home, or even through a little daily text message. Teachers can begin this dialogue with family members that can result in learning about each of the families through genuine communication and connections. The next one is communication of high expectations. So when a teacher expresses sympathy over failure, or lavishes praise for completing a simple task, or offers unsolicited help, the teacher might be sending the unintended messages of low expectations. I know it seems like that probably doesn't happen, but a lot of times when we say, yay, you close the door, and it's a 5-year-old child, that's, you know, giving praise for a very low expectation. So we have to be mindful of that kind of thing. Also, another characteristic is learning within the context of culture. The increasing diversity in our schools, the ongoing demographic changes across the nation, and the movement towards globalization is what dictates that we develop a more in-depth understanding of culture. And that's if we want to bring about the true understanding of those diverse populations. And that's what we want to do. Another characteristic is student-centered instruction. In our multicultural society, culturally responsive teaching reflects democracy at its highest level. And that means doing whatever it takes to ensure that every child is achieving and always moving towards realizing his or her potential. Another characteristic is culturally mediated instruction. So ongoing multicultural activities within the classroom setting, that's what prompts a natural awareness of cultural history, values, and the contributions of the children in our classrooms. Reshaping the curriculum is another characteristic. And this is when schools have to take the initiative and take a serious look at their curriculum that they present. They have to look at the retention and tracking policies, even the assessment and testing policies that they do. Also hiring practices and all other disempowering for those who work and learn there. As an example of this, I used to have a director at one of my old schools, and every time she hired a new teacher, she would let the rest of us know, yeah, we have Miss Lynn is starting next week. Miss Lynn was a cheap hire. And instead of her saying, well, Miss Lynn is really good at organizing, she has great skills when it comes to differentiating instruction, she didn't empower Miss Lynn by giving us all of those good things about her. She just said, well, you know what? She was a cheap hire. So we have to think about the things that we say when we disempower people, and that's not what we want to do. Another characteristic is making sure that the teacher is a facilitator. So a caring adult can make a big difference in the educational outcome of any child who's at risk of experiencing educational failures. In this slide, there is a chart, and it's going to show how we go back and forth between saying what a culturally responsive teaching in the early childhood classroom is and what it is not. So it is for all children. It is not only for children of color. Culturally responsive teaching is a moral conviction to help all children reach their fullest potential. We want them to be the very best that they can be when they're in our classrooms, and it sets them up to be the very best that they can be when they go to other classrooms. It is not for political correctness. CRT is a way to achieve fairness and equity in childcare and educational settings. It is not a way to solve all of society's problems. So Carolina and I are not so naive to think that this training today alone is going to solve all of the problems that society has, just like you shouldn't think that, you are going to solve all of the society's problems in your classroom by implementing culturally responsive teaching. It's not done by you alone. Culturally responsive teaching is an intentional and sustained effort. It is not a one-time event, such as a cultural fair, one thematic curriculum unit, or just an annual celebration. It's much more than that. Culturally responsive teaching serves a lot of different functions. It encourages a true sense of self, and children have the right to feel proud of themselves. They are entitled to their cultural heritage and a strong, positive cultural identity, and including their home language. It also promotes healthy development. During the early childhood years is when children acquire self-concept. This is where they build their self-esteem, where they learn to make friends and become aware of family and community. It's also during this time that they learn to use their words to express themselves. They can have strong feelings of fear, any of their emotions. They also tend to have magical thinking. And they also tend to believe everything that they see and hear. And because of this, this is the time that we can prevent or minimize prejudice and help children learn to function successfully and cooperatively in a culturally diverse society and world. And when we have racism that's present, it inhibits all of a child's development. CRT also prevents isolation. And it's just as important in all Caucasian programs, or all African American programs, and in all Latino programs, as it is in any multicultural program. So growing up in a community where everyone is the same gives the child a false impression that everyone everywhere is all alike. And unfortunately, these children don't know or don't understand that their country and their world is made up of many communities that are different than their own. And to exclude culturally responsive teaching from the early childhood curriculum is to risk isolating children from the rest of the world, and we don't want to do that. Culturally responsive teaching also discourages denial and fear of differences. So when you teach as if only one perspective really matters, it promotes the idea that other ways of being in the world are somehow inadequate or deficient and maybe even wrong. So if you're teaching in a classroom where everyone seems the same, begin with those differences that we have at hand and emphasize those differences among the children, such as, something as simple as hair color, family size, where the children live and where their parents work. CRT also prepares children for the future. We as teachers have to prepare children to live in our own diverse country and global marketplace, as well as to live in the future. We're setting them up for success, right? So children will need cross-cultural skills, including valuing differences, being open to change, understanding one's own cultural identity, and making decisions and resolving differences as members of diverse groups. So, this is an opportunity for you all to type in the questions box. You can just say, well, the question is, what would a culturally responsive environment look like? So, there can be physical attributes, such as diverse books, crayons of all skin colors, posters, and it can even talk about the teacher attributes, inclusive language, being welcoming. So what do you think a culturally responsive environment looks like? And Carolina will tell me what's coming up in the chat box.
I think they're still typing.
Okay.
Okay, we've got dress up clothes, so different types of dress up clothes. Some people are saying posters, the same for everyone. All activities and materials are the same. Different types of crayons, songs.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
More posters, books. I'm assuming it means like different diverse books.
Yeah.
Culture and food brought in. Developing meaningful relationships with families. Excellent.
That's really right. That's good. Okay. Thank you all for participating in that. And those are all things make up a culturally responsive environment. The diverse books, posters, making sure that the teachers are using welcoming language and being inclusive in the language, diverse books, crayons of all skin colors. That was one that I wish we had when I was a child growing up, because and it's one that I never thought of, but it's one that's a great addition. So as culturally responsive teachers, we want to accommodate individual needs and make each child in your classroom feel validated, welcome, important, and included. So we've just touched the tip of the iceberg of CRT, or culturally responsive teaching. But as early childhood educators, we are used to extra things being thrown in our pot. So let's throw one more ingredient into our already full pot. So that ingredient is going to be implicit bias. And in order to fully understand how we can become more culturally responsive as teachers, we have to first understand implicit bias and its role in our educational practices. And this is a critical step in changing the school environments and interactions between administrators, teachers, families, and children. So when talking about educators and expectations, let's discuss implicit bias. So remember a little while ago, we talked about teacher expectations, but in this portion, you'll see how those expectations tie in. But first, I want to do another quick poll in the questions box. Is this statement true or false? Everyone has biases. What do you think? Do you think it's true or false?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Everything has come up true as of now.
Okay, good. I'm glad everyone has that idea, because it is absolutely true. Everyone has biases. It doesn't even matter the topic. It could be something simple or something big. We're going to work and define implicit bias. Now, Webster's dictionary defines it as bias that results from the tendency to process information based on unconscious associations and feelings, even when these are contrary to one's conscious or declared beliefs. Research on implicit or unconscious biases reveals that teachers' unconscious beliefs about racial and ethnic differences can and do affect their relationships with the students in their classrooms. Not only their relationships, but even how they assess and rate their students. In order to explain it a little bit more clearly, this slide is going to help us look at the difference between explicit bias and implicit bias. So explicit bias is that judgment that we make in favor of or against a person or a thing or a group. So looking at the bubbles, we always choose that restaurant because they have so many vegetarian options. Or let's watch a sci-fi movie. That's my favorite genre. Or I like going shopping with my dad instead of my mom. My mom rushes me, and my dad just lets me take my time. So explicit biases are those preferences or aversions or dislikes that we are aware of. These are the people and the places and the things that we intentionally choose over others. We are aware of these biases or preferences, and we approve them on a conscious level because they match up with what we believe in and what we promote already. Now, on the flip side of it is implicit bias in purple. And so those are the judgments that we make without even realizing or being aware that we're doing so. So flipping the other side of the coin, with implicit bias, you might say a vegetarian restaurant in that neighborhood? I don't think so. Or I better choose a romantic comedy. She's probably not even into sci-fi. Or I guess I'll ask my mom to take me shopping. Dads really don't like shopping. So those implicit biases are those preferences and attitudes towards people and places and things based on stereotypes, and we aren't always really sure of where those ideas and those stereotypes and those attitudes come from in the first place. Our attitudes and our biases are formed from messages that we are exposed to on a daily basis and from a variety of sources. It could be television, social media, which I'm trying to stay off of as much as I can, but it's hard. It could be newspapers and conversations with the people that we love and we trust. And our brain processes and sorts this information without us even realizing it. So the picture here says it's the people I've met, the things I've done, places I've been, things I've viewed on TV and online, and books I've read. So what our brain does is organizes all of this information in little mailboxes that we pull out later. And it makes mental shortcuts. So our brains process an enormous amount of information every single day about different things. And like I said about the mailboxes, it organizes them into these mailboxes or mental shortcuts in order to help us make sense of the world that's around us. And this happens constantly without any conscious effort at all. So psychologists say that our brains are capable of processing approximately 11 million bits of information every second. I think mine is down to about 700 bits of information every second with all that's been going on. But can you imagine the amount of shortcuts it makes, as well as the implications of those shortcuts? High stress moments are when our brains rely on those mental shortcuts the most. It's in these moments when our brains shift straight to our implicit associations or our stereotypes instead of slowing down a little bit and thinking about the things in a non-biased way. And what I mean by that is, say for instance, you are in your classroom and you're involved with an art activity with a group of children, and across the classroom, you hear somebody scream. You automatically jump up and you say, oh my gosh, who did Lily just bite now? Without even knowing what happened. But your brain automatically shifted to that implication that it was Lily because she is your biter. Lily is pegged as your biter. So that's why your mind went straight to her without even knowing what happened. And that's a high stress moment because we don't like dealing with having to write all of the incident reports about a biter and having to talk to a parent about it. So that's a high stress moment where your brain automatically took that mental shortcut. I also want to take a minute and show you just how our brains organize information and makes judgments without us realizing it, just like the Lily situation, the biter. So I'd like for us to do a quick exercise. In a few seconds, I'm going to display a list of colors on the screen. And when that list comes up, just to yourselves, I'd like for you to name the color of each word as quickly as you can. Again, what you're going to do is name the color of each word as quickly as you can. I'm going to give you a few seconds. All right. So I want you now to go back to that loving chat box or questions box and tell us how you did. How did you do on being able to name the color of the words? Carolina, do we have any answers coming in yet?
Yes, they're starting to come in now.
Okay.
Somebody put easy, others
Oh.
put wow, not so good, absolutely terrible. I read the name, not the color. It took me twice as long looking at the color name. So yeah, we have a quite a mix there. Somebody's
Okay.
quick.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to give a round of applause to y'all, to those of you who said it was easy and you did it quick, because I have to be honest and let you know that I struggled a little bit with this one, just like some of you did. It was easier and quicker to read the word green when it was written in green than it is to read the word green when it's written in brown. And that's just another way to show you that the shortcuts that our brain creates is what made that happen. So our impressions and reactions are triggered automatically through rapid association of people, groups, objects, and our attitudes or stereotypes about them. That is the main reason why we have to be aware of the misinterpretations that we make because of the implications of it. So how does this information about the brain and our interpretations fit into implicit bias and the culturally responsive classroom? In 2016, Walter Gillum and others published a report about a study conducted to determine if preschool teachers displayed any biases when they observed children of different races in the classroom. So I have a video prepared here, and we're going to take a look at it. So let's take a look at this video. Okay, I don't think I said it before the video played, but the title of that video is Bias Isn't Just a Police Problem, It's a Preschool Problem. So how many of you were surprised by the information that you saw in that video? You can type it into the questions box if you'd like to, but
Yes, quite a few people are saying me. Somebody said not surprised at all.
okay.
Absolutely valid.
Right.
Quite a few's me being surprised.
Mhm.
And quite a few not surprised.
Okay. Yeah, some of that information is surprising, and for some of us, we kind of already have that idea that that's the way that it's going to be. But what do we know about expectations for children? The expectations that we hold of our children are critical in determining their academic and social outcomes. And when we teach them, we have to teach them from a model where we have very high expectations, not a deficit model or deficit idea of them. And we also know that the behaviors that we focus on are the behaviors that we get more of anyway, right? So having high expectations of all children is critical. According to the Department of Education, every year, 50,000 preschoolers are suspended from public school programs. Students can't learn if they're not in school. And the research shows that Black boys are being disproportionately pushed out of public schools due to factors such as implicit bias starting in the preschool classroom. This is consequential information because suspending students during this important developmental period creates a negative relationship with school that is more likely to last throughout a child's education. And this is when children no longer feel supported or understood in the classroom once they are suspended. And there's what we call the preschool to prison pipeline that some people believe is a term that's used is a little bit too harsh or an overstatement when we use it for 3 to 4 year olds, but it's very real. And for many young people, our schools are increasingly a gateway to the criminal justice system. This phenomenon is a consequence of a culture that has zero tolerance, and it's widespread in our schools, and it's many children of their fundamental rights to an education. So what can we do to help change the disparity? What we can do is provide educators implicit bias so that they understand and negate some of the biases that are in some of the classrooms. Schools should also move away from some of those zero tolerance policies that they have. Teachers know their students better than any resource officer or any administrator, which puts them in a singularly empowered position to keep students in the classroom. We know that this isn't easy, but when teachers take a more relationship building approach and a less punitive approach in the classroom, students are more likely to complete their education. And I also really want to stress and let you all keep in mind that this information that we give is not meant to blame teachers in any way for the statistics or for any of the disparities that we're sharing. We know that as teachers, our intent is always for the best interest of the children in the classrooms, but we do want to highlight the impact that preschool suspensions and expulsions have on most of our vulnerable students. So now we'll talk about how culturally responsive teaching looks in a child's eye view by Ms. Carolina.
Okay, great job, Adrienne. Thank you. Just get on the right spot here. Okay, so we're going to start off this section with a little what we call a poll, but you're going to type it into the chat or the questions box. In your opinion, are children colorblind? Yes or no? Go ahead and type that into the questions box when you have a second. And Adrienne, when you have a chance and start seeing them come in, just let me know what they're saying.
Okay.
So are children colorblind?
I am not seeing anything yet.
Okay.
I see a lot of yeses.
Okay.
I don't usually do this portion, so it's a little bit confusing. Okay, I see some yeses, some nos.
Okay. All right. So I can move on to the next slide.
Okay, let me
so if you answered no, if you typed no into the chat box, you are correct. So there is a myth in popular culture that young children are colorblind or don't notice race. By this logic, children would be like blank slates who can't really develop racial prejudices until they're explicitly taught to do so. And this leads many adults to argue that we should not discuss race with preschoolers because they're too young, or even in mentioning race would maybe put some ideas into their heads or poison their minds. psychological research, like the slide shows, suggests that this approach is actually all wrong. In fact, research clearly shows that children not only recognize race from a very young age, but also develop biases by ages 3 to 5 that do not necessarily represent or resemble the racial attitudes of the adults in their lives. So this research suggests that we actually need to rethink what we know about young children and race. Many times as we hear other adults saying, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't see race, but actually having that ideology prevents us from thinking critically about race. It allows us to avoid talking about racial inequity in schools, and colorblindness actually leads to more biases. So we want to try to change our thinking about being colorblind, especially in regards to children.
Okay.
So what do children learn and when? Let's learn. Many of you are familiar with different child development theorists, for example, Piaget and his cognitive developmental theory, Vygotsky and his social cultural theory, and there's several more. Well, these theorists all talk about the way that children learn different concepts at different stages of life, and this is actually also true about children's awareness of race and ethnicity. So initial awareness of race probably begins before 6 months of age, which is actually really surprising. A study by Katz and Kofkin found that infants are able to non-verbally categorize people by race and gender at 6 months of age. The infants actually looked significantly longer at an unfamiliar face of a different race than they did at an unfamiliar face of their same race. So something that we as adults can do, we can teach through our actions, right? We should expose our children to diverse environments. And for this reason, it's really important for kids to see their parents and other adults in their lives interacting socially with people of other racial ethnic groups. Toddlers, as young as 2 years old, use racial categories to reason about people's behaviors. So when you'll hear often children, when they're becoming more vocal, it's normal for them to spontaneously start talking about skin color. And in this situation, parents and teachers should really use this opportunity to help the child by replying in a very calm and positive tone. Yes, he does have brown skin. It's not the same as yours, but it's a really nice color too. So it's very non-judgmental, very calm the way you say it. It's also a great idea to bring up people's physical differences before children do. A smart time to do this is when you're playing with toys, sitting down in a center with the children. You're already pointing out various physical attributes like, oh, this doll has a hat on and that one doesn't. This one has darker skin and that one has lighter skin. It's okay to point those things out if you're doing it from a positive and calm tone so that they start to notice and discuss those differences in a positive way. And 3 to 5-year-olds, surprisingly, not only categorize people by race, but they express bias based on race. So after a year-long study, they found that 3 to 5-year-olds in racially and ethnically diverse preschool use racial categories and gender and ability to identify themselves and others, to include or exclude children from activities, and also to negotiate power in their own social play networks. It's really common for children this age to assign positive traits to people of their own ethnic group and negative traits to people who look different. As a result, you may hear troubling comments like, that boy has funny looking eyes, or her skin looks dirty. The best way to respond is to rebut these statements in a very calm and straightforward manner and just say, her skin isn't dirty, it's just not like yours. People are all different skin colors. These biases are understandable, we all have them, but how can we begin to address them in the classroom? And that's the big question, right? It is valuable for educators to be mindful and to implement strategies in their classrooms that recognize young children's social biases. So we know that they have them, recognize them, and let's face them, right? And talk about it. So when it comes to addressing biases in the classroom, we want to be aware that children, possibly at an earlier age than we expected, may demonstrate bias and preference in their interactions. They're not immune to bias in preschool and may treat each other differently based on race, ethnicity, or gender. You also want to determine how you want to address situations when bias occurs. So rather than ignoring situation, which so many of us do because it can be uncomfortable, right? To talk about skin, you just don't say that. It's very important to talk about it. So children demonstrate bias, educators can use these situations as inspirations for story selection, activities, projects, circle time discussions. Really important to kind of bring it out in the forefront and discuss. In our next slide here, we're going to give you a better understanding of what this can look like in the classroom on a more concrete level. So this right here, what you see is actually called a sociogram. All right. Sociograms are visual representations of interpersonal relationships in a group or class. Once children start like that real interactive play, usually around the age of 4 years old, sociograms can be very helpful for helping you as the teacher to identify children who might be socially isolated and in need of some help initiating interaction or flagging up unbalanced friendships. Many of us don't need a sociogram to see this, right? We're in tune with our class, we see this happening, and we have to decide whether we want to kind of step in or just let it play out. But if you take a look at this sociogram, the arrows represent who initiates interactions. So that's going to be, you'll see, oh, sorry. And who likes playing with whom. So I know it's kind of overwhelming, but let's take a look at Lisa. She's at the very top in the circle. Ooh, beautiful, Adrian. At the very top in purple. And notice that Lisa initiates, you see her gray arrows coming out. She initiates interaction and likes playing with others, but her gray arrows are the only ones coming out, right? To Sam, to Lucy, and to Taylor. You don't see any reciprocal arrows coming back towards her. She's not getting a response and she's not being really valued as a play partner. So this might need to be addressed, right? Initially, you might think this type of issue doesn't need to be addressed because children are children and they'll figure it out for themselves. But it's actually imperative that we address it because children do begin to formulate their own social constructs based on gender, race, language, and these are organizing principles of what can go on in the classroom. And when children are excluded, and this is very important, it often prevents them from cognitive development. So to illustrate this point further, I'm going to give you a little example. So just for example, let's say that you have a group of girls like this one in the image that always choose to go to the drawing table or to the art center, right? And you decide to watch closely and you notice that when another little girl, not typical of their play group, sits down to color, for example, the little girl in blue, the group of girls might say, "We are all coloring with pink and you're coloring with blue. We're not your friend because you're not coloring with pink." So the other little girl, let's call her Sarah, with a smile on her face and seeing that there are no more pink crayons, grabs a red crayon. And she says, "Now we can be friends." And the girls proceed to say, "Do you even know your colors? That's red, not pink. They're different. You can't come to my house later since you don't have any pink on your paper." So Sarah, the little girl in blue, grabs her paper, throws it in the garbage, and just chooses another center to go to. That was a moment of exclusion that prevented Sarah from cognitive development that she would have gotten had she been able to stay or felt welcome to stay at the drawing table. We know as teachers that drawing is a very rich literacy experience, right? It's a very important precursor to writing. It's also important to keep in mind that when children are excluded, they can lash out with negative behaviors. Although Sarah in this example did not, that could have very easily happened. She could have broken her crayon or thrown her paper and gotten upset. And if we weren't really paying attention, we may not have noticed that, and it would just seem like that behavior is coming out of nowhere. We want to keep in mind that as humans, we tend to gather in groups of people that we connect with, right? We all do it when we go to a training or go somewhere in public. We tend to gravitate toward people that we have things in common with or connect with. The dilemma is when there's people who don't fit in that space. So as teachers, we want to watch closely for those moments of exclusion and intervene very subtly when appropriate. So I want you to think for a second. How could a teacher have intervened in that moment with Sarah and the other girls? If anyone has an idea, please type it into the chat box. We'll give you a little bit of time. I just want to get an idea of how as a teacher you may have intervened in that moment. And there is no wrong or right answer. Just want to kind of try to have some interaction here in this webinar type forum. Adrian, if there's no comments, it's okay. It may be difficult to type into the.
Okay, well, I have one response is give Sarah a pink crayon.
Okay. Yes, so if there is extra pink crayons, that would be.
Okay, and someone says
That
to
would be
ask them to share when she is done.
Okay. Okay, great. So another thing a teacher might do, instead of, remember, the idea is to kind of subtly intervene, right? So a teacher who has a relationship with her students may just sit at the table and say, hey, can I color with you guys? Wow, there's so many beautiful colors on the table to color with. I love the color red. I think I'll use that first to make this flower. Oh, Sarah, I see that you love the color red too, right? So you're kind of very subtly coming in. You're not blaming anybody in particular or saying, you guys need to let her play with you, or that's not very nice, right? You're just very subtly coming in and keeping Sarah in the drawing center so she's still able to get that cognitive development while starting to kind of strike up a conversation about the different colors, and it's okay to color with the different colors that are at the table. That may be another suggestion.
And Carolina, there were a couple of suggestions like that
Oh,
too.
sure. Oh,
and
okay.
I also said sharing and caring in one slogan to use the moment to explain that friends can make different choices and still be friends.
Beautiful. Yes. Take it as a teachable moment and run with it. That's awesome. Excellent, excellent responses, everybody. Thank you for participating in that.
And I just like to remind everyone that I'm manning the chat box now, and I am not a Spanish speaker. So if you are typing in the chat pane or the questions box, please type it in English so I can read it. Thank you.
All right. So this quote actually really embodies our look into bias in the early childhood classroom. We have to face it within ourselves before we can change it, right? So James Baldwin, one of my favorite authors, says, not everything that we face can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So we want to try to keep that in mind when we're thinking of what's coming up next here, which is bringing implicit bias to an end with culturally responsive teaching. So in order to make a serious effort to combat some of these implicit bias and create a truly culturally responsive classroom, we have to first look within. So as you do that, we want to be mindful of the social environment that you're nurturing in your classroom. We know that children use the adults in their lives, especially their educators, as reference points for how to react to others. Understanding our own preferences and biases are helpful in determining whether social bias towards certain groups is being perpetuated in the classroom. And these biases and preferences may be influencing children's interactions with their peers, as well as educators' selection of activities, projects, books, and images that they're presenting in the classroom. There are a multitude of methods and strategies that we can use to bring implicit bias to an end, or at least be more aware of it and change it in the classroom. And today we're going to discuss 5 of those. Okay, we're going to discuss assessing your own personal bias, getting to know your students, adapting your teaching and curriculum, elevating the students' culture and native language, and involving the family and community. So each one of those we'll kind of go into a little bit more. So the first step in being culturally responsive is to do an internal audit. Truly digging deep inside of ourselves and recognizing that naming some of those things we don't really like to look at or talk about are important. So you want to check for your own implicit biases. We all have them, and as uncomfortable as it is to admit that, it's a really important step. So the experiences, like Adrienne mentioned in the previous slides, those experiences that we've had along our journey in life have formed those stereotypes, which have then turned into implicit bias. And these are unintentional, unconscious attitudes that impact how we relate to our students, their parents, and how we choose curriculum, assess learning, and plan lessons, which is really important to kind of look at. If you're interested, you see here our handouts icon. There is a handout, and it's actually titled Internal Audit. And within that handout, there's going to be a link to the Harvard University's Project Implicit, which actually has an online test you can take to examine some of your own implicit bias. So that's all in the handout, as well as some questions or sample questions to ask yourself. So getting to know your students and the factors that make up the students' personal and family lives are going to help teachers to make lessons that are more culturally responsive and build relationships with their students. After all, that's one of the key features that we want here, right? Taking factors such as socioeconomic status, family makeup, educational expectations, and goals that the family has for the child, student interests and experiences will enhance and teacher-student relationships, and it will also provide opportunities to make the learning experience more personalized and to better meet each student's needs. So you want to respect and accept the cultural differences, so include family values and strengths and the positive effects that those differences may have on the development and behavior in your classroom. You also want to create environments and experiences that affirm and respect those cultural, linguistic, and ethnic, socioeconomic diverse students that you have in your class. This is going to demonstrate that ability to embrace these factors into the daily curriculum by partnering with families and caregivers to incorporate and value aspects of language and traditions and bring those into that daily routine. As you can see in the image, we've got some parents that have come in to share different things from their own culture with the children. So that definitely helps. Okay, so we want to adapt your teaching and curriculum. Oh, Adrian, we're missing the words on that one. That's strange.
No, they'll come up.
Okay. Oh, you're fan. Okay, so CRT complements a variety of subjects. Consider what you have learned about your students and make sure that your focus, standards, instructional approaches, and materials reflect the cultures of the students and expose them to different cultures. So we want to use materials that demonstrate acceptance of all children's gender, family, race, language, culture, ethnic, socioeconomic, and special needs, right? This is going to allow them to make real-world connection, some of those students, and the others to just learn about different perspectives and experiences, which is super important. We want to build children's understanding of their own and other cultures by providing those experiences using songs, stories, and languages that are familiar to the child. So even you as the teacher, if you don't speak a particular language, you can still bring in songs or other people in the school perhaps that do speak the language to help teach you and learn those songs with the students. Then you also want to create learning environments that allow individuals to retain and appreciate their own and each other's language. So this builds the children's pride in their own cultures, in their families, their communities, by creating those learning centers that reflect culture and community members of the children. So for example, culturally reflective themes, home language reflected in print. So if you have words labeling things, you can also label in Spanish or in any different language that you find that you decide to do it in. Family photographs are also excellent ways to do that. In the handouts, you see the handout icon there, there is a list, a really detailed list of diverse books for children under 5, and it kind of breaks the books down into different categories and then explains what each book is about so that you can get an idea before you decide to maybe purchase a book or get a book from the library. You can have a good idea for what that's about. Okay. We're going to show a quick video here. Although this video does show and highlight children that are, I believe, in 2nd grade in elementary school, the idea and the premise is 100% the same for our early childhood education centers, our preschools and our children and families. So let's take a look at the video and then we'll chat. Okay, how great was that video? I loved it. I love
I
everything.
love that video.
Yes, excellent. If you notice, I mean, everything she's discussing there is kind of what we're discussing here, but on a preschool scale, right? And if you notice in her classroom, looking around how different cultures are represented up on the walls, it was just very rich with print, with different languages. I thought that was phenomenal. So that was just kind of a way to illustrate what we've been discussing here. All right, so for number 4, we want to understand that family and community have different cultural, linguistic, ethnic, and socioeconomic experiences that play a role in how children respond socially to adults and other children. So you really want to make that effort to assure emerging bilingual students that their first language has value and it will benefit them in their literacy. For example, children who can read in their own native language then can understand the process of reading, and then if they just need to learn new letters and sounds, it will help attain that reading proficiency in a second language. So again, very important, not only for the child, but for the family of that child to hear that you value that importance. Getting to know students, families, and communities helps you to be responsive in a way that really authentically represents the learners in your classroom, whether in person or online. CRT really helps you to foster a positive learning environment. So you can distribute a survey to families at the beginning of the year to ask about their home language, what their tech access is like, what each family likes to do together, and that will help kind of give you some knowledge as far as what each of the families, the students and the families in your class are like and what they have access to, because you also want to be able to reach them, right? For example, Broward County Public Schools, my daughters go there, they send out a survey initially, they ask you how you prefer to reach, if it's via text or email or a phone call. All of that is important because everybody doesn't have access to the same things. Making phone calls is also a wonderful way to connect. You really want to make sure that that call is made by someone who speaks the home language in the household. So if it means that you have to, find another teacher who maybe speaks Creole, or somebody that you know or that somebody else knows in order to help you, it really brings some value to the situation to let the parent communicate in their home language. So why does it matter? Right? Children begin to develop their own sense of self-awareness in early childhood, and this sense of self-awareness helps them gain either a positive or a negative feeling toward their own cultural groups and those of others. So in addition, when culturally responsive teachers, it centers students' identities in the classroom, they support the development of the students, the racial and ethnic pride, which a trove of studies favorably link racial and ethnic pride to belonging, to school engagement, interest in learning, and even better grades, which is in the end what we want, right? If you remember, we had this slide at the beginning of the presentation, but here it is again. It's just a reminder. In a nutshell, our goal as culturally responsive teachers is always to accommodate the individual needs of the students in our classroom, make each of those children feel validated, welcomed, important, and included in every aspect possible. So as we leave you today, we want you to keep some of these questions in mind as you reflect on the culturally diverse children and families and communities that you work with in order to ensure that your classrooms are culturally responsive. These questions are also going to be on that handout that we talked about earlier called the internal audit handout. These are some important questions to kind of go through and think about when returning or going back into your classroom if you want to try to incorporate this. So how can I better serve culturally diverse children and families and communities, right, in your own classroom? What do I need to become a culturally competent and responsive practitioner? What does my program need to be more inclusive of diverse children and families, and what barriers exist that prevent me or my program from being more inclusive and equitable? Those are all kind of things to keep in mind and just bring to the forefront. We know that this training is not something that you can take and bring to your classroom and immediately change all biases and how everything works. But if you're able to just pull out a couple things, if you're even able to just ask yourself some of these questions or really try to focus in on some of the visuals and the books that you have in your classroom, then we have done our job here, because at the end of the day, every little bit helps, right? Everyone is not going to have the ability to change something in a day. I don't think anyone really does, but little by little, as we bring in different ideas and different inclusive types of education, then we know that we're making somebody in our class, at least one, hopefully all, feel very comfortable and confident in who they are and in that classroom. But we have to keep in mind, is culturally responsive teaching only relevant in classrooms that serve diverse populations? Type into the question box, true or false. Culturally responsive teaching is only relevant in classrooms that serve diverse or multicultural populations. Adrian, when you have a chance or if you start to see some of those, let me know. So in other words, I have a classroom that's made up of entirely African-American students or entirely Latinx students or white students. Should I bother being culturally responsive?
I see a whole lot of false coming in.
Awesome, awesome, excellent. So you're right, it is false. We know that students who feel valued take ownership of their own learning, but equally as important is the fact that students who learn about different cultures during their education feel more comfortable and safe with these differences later in life. This allows them to interact in a wider range of social groups and feel more confident in themselves as well as in their interactions with others. Excellent job, everybody, with that one. So our students need us now more than ever, right? We have to roll up our sleeves and do what we must to close this achievement gap that we have. Culturally responsive teaching is one step in the right direction. We know in summary that the outcome is a student body that loves to learn, excels academically, and has teachers who respond to their needs. Being culturally responsive encourages students to feel a sense of belonging and helps create a space where they feel safe, respected, heard, and challenged. And it prepares children for the future by helping them to develop cross-cultural skills that will be needed to fully participate in society. And with that, we will leave it open for any questions. Adrian and I have our email here posted so that if there's anything in addition that you want to discuss or any information or resources that you need, please feel free to reach out to us. We would be happy to help you or send you anything that we have found. And we want to thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend this time with us.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And on this next slide, if you want to take your phones out and take a picture of our email addresses, if you don't already have it, you can do that. But we also have some resources that you could look at a little bit further for some extra information that you can use in your classrooms or just anything that you can get a little bit more detail from that you didn't get from us today. So if you want to take your cell phones out and take a picture of these resources as well. Carolina, someone says, in all the trainings you give us books and for each of the topics. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. It's we do these webinars, it's like difficult, so it's nice to hear some positive feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you for some great information. Debbie says it's an awesome training. Thank you, Debbie. Okay. Miss Barbara, you said that you're not able to download. If you can, let's see, she says email, if we could email the handouts to her.
Sure, just have her email one of us, whoever.
If you can, Miss Barbara, can you email one of us at, I'll go back to our emails so that you can see. It's either agilliard@elcbroward.org or cwhite@elcbroward.org. If you could email us and let us know that you need the trainings, then we'll drop those handouts into an attachment. Debbie K said that she can't access the handouts either.
Oh no.
Okay.
Well, Yeah, anybody who needs them, feel free to email us and we will
Yes.
sell them to everyone if need be.
Absolutely. So if you cannot download the handouts, okay, Libby says she had to keep trying, but it finally worked. So if you are having trouble downloading that handout, please email us and we will send those handouts to you. So everyone who's having problems, please email us.
Oh yeah, that's a bummer. Those are some actually really good handouts, especially the book list. So please email us so that we can get that to you.
Okay. Well, Allison just said she'll send out those handouts with the certificates. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Okay, so. Do you want to go ahead and close?
Sure. Thank you again,
All
everybody,
right.
for attending.
Thank you for attending, everyone. We're going to go ahead and close. And Allison said she will send out all of those handouts along with the certificates. So thank you again, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Yes, have a good one, everybody.
Bye.